Hello once again, my readers of good literature. My name is, as always, Nick Pell, and this is, as always, coming from my white room. Now, today could be categorized as something of a sad day, but it is mainly due to the fact that we are at the end of the Game of Thrones series that I've been doing for the past 5 weeks. This week's book is, in fact, A Dance with Dragons, and it is the most recent novel in the series that has been released. So until The Winds of Winter is released in probably like 2015-ish, you won't see another review in this series, which is kind of sad because I've been reading the book since about the second week of May, starting with Game of Thrones, and now just yesterday, June 28th, finishing up the series itself with A Dance with Dragons. So it'll be slightly tough to stop reading these new characters and seeing what goes down with Jon, Tyrion, Cersei, Jaime, and everyone else in the Seven Kingdoms, but it's what's gotta be done. So let's begin with characters, shall we? I'm just gonna say this right now, there will be spoilers in this review consisting of anything from Game of Thrones to Feast for Crows, and then very little, just the beginnings of individuals' narratives. So keep that in mind as you watch this, so you have been warned. Now, the first character that we see in this book itself is Tyrion Lannister, who was absent during the time of Feast for Crows. As you know, he is the brother of Queen Cersei and also the brother of the Kingslayer, Jaime Lannister. And currently he is on the run for the murder of Joffrey Baratheon. As was seen at the end of Storm of Swords, Tyrion supposedly poisoned Joffrey's cup, or at least he's being accused of it, and caused his death. And he is making his way towards Meereen to, I think that's how you say it, to seek out Daenerys Targaryen and aid her in her conquest of the Seven Kingdoms. Our second character is Daenerys Targaryen. I think it's a fan favorite. And Daenerys is the Queen of Meereen and also its other name, Slaver's Bay. She is the mother of dragons and the mother of many other slaves that she has freed in her conquests across the Narrow Sea. And at the beginning of her narrative, we see her ruling Meereen and trying to establish a peace within its borders and with the surrounding cities. So that's kind of interesting to watch, and it could foreshadow how she deals with the Seven Kingdoms when she eventually gets over there in later novels. Next up, we have Jon Snow. He's probably one of my favorite characters in this novel. And as was established at the end of Storm of Swords, Jon is now the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. After Lord Mormont's death at the end of, or during Storm of Swords, the Night's Watch elected a new leader, and Jon was that leader, and that happened at the end of Storm of Swords. So at this novel, Jon is basically dealing with Stannis Baratheon kind of occupying his wall at the moment, and along with that Melisandre. And then Mance Rayder and his wildlings are also are also something that Jon needs to deal with. So it's kind of interesting to see how he deals with the wildlings and everything else that's kind of occupying his time, because this is the first time I think that Jon has dealt with other forces that we've been seeing that aren't solely based within the Night's Watch. And the next character that we see is one that hasn't been seen since the end of Clash of Kings, and that is Theon Greyjoy. He makes his return under the captivity of Ramsay Bolton, and he is currently under the name of Reek, because Theon has just been decimated. His entire personality that he had in Clash of Kings and Game of Thrones has been changed. He has been held prisoner and treated like scum for the past, I'm assuming, 2 novels, or at least 1 novel, so Storm Swords. This has made a major impact on him, as you will see as you read his chapters. So, yeah, Theon Greyjoy has returned, and it's really cool to see how he is different. And we also have his sister, Asha Greyjoy. She was seen in Feast for Crows, but she shows up about midway, I think, or a little before midway of Dance with Dragons. We get to see what's going on with her after she has lost her rights to the throne of the Iron Islands. She starts out the novel trying to find a way to win back her throne, so we get to see her with that. Next up, we have Davos Seaworth. This is a very interesting character, Davos. He starts out the novel this time not with Stannis, but sailing towards White Harbor. He is attempting to instill an alliance with them between Stannis and White Harbor itself. So we see him going towards it, and then other stuff happens that leaves me hopeful for the Winds of Winter with Davos. And we also have Bran Stark. He makes his return in this book after being absent from A Feast for Crows. And as you know, Bran is basically thought to be dead by almost everyone in the Seven Kingdoms besides a select few. And he is currently beyond the wall with his companions and seeking out the Three-Eyed Crow to kind of figure out why the Three-Eyed Crow has contacted him and to learn more about his ability to go into different skins. We also have Arya Stark, who was present in Feast for Crows, and now we get to see her after the events of that, and she begins this novel blind. She only has a few chapters, but she begins the novel itself blind. And she becomes blind because she has killed a deserter of the Night's Watch who was originally traveling with Samwell Tarly. We have Jaime Lannister as well. We see Jaime basically in one chapter, I believe, one or two. We see him basically trying to retake the lands that Robb Stark had originally taken before his death and just instilling the land back into Lannister control. So the end of his chapter is actually pretty exciting because we get to see something that probably sets up the Winds of Winter fairly well. So it makes me kind of excited to see Jaime's chapters in that next installment. We also have Cersei Lannister. As was seen at the end of Feast for Crows, she is being held for treason, or potential treason, basically. And we see her as a prisoner of the faith in King's Landing. And after trying to basically thwart Marjorie's attempts at the throne, she kind of gets the backlash of it and is charged for treason herself for almost the same crimes as Marjorie herself is being charged with. So you get to see Cersei in a slightly less high up position, and she's not as full of herself this time. And it is kind of cool to see because it shows that she isn't just totally one-sided, but she kind of is, so I don't know. And our final character is Quentyn Martell, and he is the Prince of Dorne, and he has been sent across the Narrow Sea to seek out Daenerys Targaryen. He only has a few chapters in the book as a whole, but towards the end they are essential to the story itself, at least with Daenerys and Meereen. Yeah, that is the characters portion. I didn't talk about every character, even though there are some that have points of view, but I didn't feel that they were really wholly essential to the story itself, so I didn't talk about them. Or there are some that start up at the end of the novel after certain events, but if I talked about those events, they'd be spoilers, and I don't want to include spoilers or major spoilers, so I'm not going to talk about them. But know that Barristan Selmy, I think his name is, he has a few chapters towards the end. And also, I think Ariel Horta also has some chapters about midway through, maybe one or two. So just know that. And now we move on to the plot. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this book is that the first 2/3 of the book is basically an overlap of what happened in Feast for Crows. It's the same timeline, but different characters. And you kind of see that with Jon's first 2 or 3 chapters. Because you see a conversation that he had with Samwell Tarly in Feast for Crows portrayed through Jon's eyes instead of Sam's. So right there you know that's an overlap, and also George R. R. Martin says it in a little intro paragraph at before the first chapter. So know that before you go into it. First 2/3 is the same timeline as Feast for Crows, but then at about page 600 that timelines start to mix again, and you see characters from Feast for Crows pop up, like Cersei, Jaime, Arya, people like that. So, but the story in general mainly focuses on Jon Snow, Daenerys Targaryen, and Tyrion Lannister. Those are the storylines that I felt seem to be the most important in this story, and the ones that Martin seemed to focus on most of all. Because even past the 2/3 point, where you'd think that like all the characters are gonna have big chapters and stuff, no, it mainly stays focused on the events in Meereen, the events at the Night's Watch, and the events that Tyrion is going through. Know that with the plot, it's almost one-sided, but the other characters do have a decent sense of importance as well. But overall, the plot does work well, and it does its job. It's a transition novel. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. It's like Feast for Crows because it is setting up events that are due to occur in The Winds of Winter and the 7th book's finale. So know that, because I've seen a lot of people hating on this book for one reason or another, but I actually enjoyed it for the most part. But I'll get to that in the enjoyment. But just know that the plot does not really ruin the book. I felt that was more exciting than Feast for Crows, just because they were events and characters that I actually cared about for the most part. The War of the Five Kings is pretty much done. Stannis is trying to recuperate his army, but he's not really making much progress with it. The Lannisters have all but won. The Iron Islands are trying to launch an offensive, but I'm pretty sure they won't make it. But at the book's end chapters, you see that new war is just on the horizon, and this mainly deals with the Targaryens. And I'm not going to get into specifics because there's a reveal that occurs probably like a fourth of the way through the book that shocked me. I didn't see it coming, but know that. So I'll be excited for Winds of Winter because I'm pretty sure it has potential to be just like the Storm of Swords book was, because I felt that Game of Thrones and Clash of Kings, they both kind of led up to the epicness that was Storm of Swords. Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons could be leading up to the epicness that is the Winds of Winter. And then possibly the finale, which would be whatever it is. But comedy remains as well. You see Tyrion and you see his wittiness, because he's just the main comical character, I felt like. But there are funny things that happen with other characters as well, such as Daenerys, Jon, Cersei, Jaime, all these other characters. You just have to look for the humor. That's more or less the plot. Like I said, the story takes place during the Feast for Crows timeline for about the first 2/3, then it branches out. And know that it works, and I enjoyed it. Alright, now we have themes, and we have 5 themes actually this time. We have life and death, and this mainly goes with something along the lines of what Jon Snow has to deal with, because he has enemies on every side, and when someone disobeys his order and is outright denying his authority, Jon has to decide what kind of action he's going to take. Is he going to hang the person or just send them to a prison? What's he going to do? And you see that pretty early on with Jon, actually, but it also deals with the wildlings as well. Is he going to let them live, or is he going to have them just die? So you see that, and that also goes with right versus wrong, which is our second theme. And this could be seen with a number of different characters, just based on events that they go through and things that happen and whatnot. We also have power and how really to wield it. And you see that with Daenerys' narrative for the most part, but also with Cersei and anyone else in the novel that has some sort of power, and also with Jon Snow. Jon Snow and Daenerys seem to have the most struggle in terms of power struggles. So they're the ones that mainly deal with this. We also have religion once again in terms of the Red God, the Many-Faced God, the Drowned God, all these different gods that encompass the Seven Kingdoms and across the Narrow Sea. It's not a major thing, but it's also in there, and it's starting to become a little bit more of a factor in terms of what God these people kind of put their faith in. And lastly, we have justice. As always, what is the true form of justice? Yada yada yada. Check my other reviews if you want more detail. Alright, and now we have enjoyment. Now, does this book live up to the amazingness, and does it surpass Storm of Swords in the near 10-year wait that people had to go through between this one and Feast for Crows. No, but that does not mean it is a bad book, because for the most part it is like Feast for Crows in terms of it is a transition novel, like I talked about with the plot. The events in this book kind of set up things that are due to happen in The Winds of Winter, or possibly the 7th book. But if nothing else, it is on a level with the Clash of Kings book that I reviewed 3 or 4 videos back, in terms that it kind of sets up the next book. But it does have its flaws, however. One gripe that I had, and that kind of annoyed me a lot, is that we didn't see any of Sansa, we don't see any of Samwell. And that kind of annoyed me, because I was really looking forward to both of their narratives, because they end in such a way that it makes you excited for the next novel. You see Sansa leaving the Vale with Robert Arryn and Littlefinger, and you don't know what's going to happen because they're basically out of the protection of the Vale now. And then you see Samwell, he's in the Citadel, and he's trying to become a maester, and he's telling these people about it, and you see him interact with people that you saw in the prologue of Feast for Crows, and then you just don't see him at all in this, besides through Jon's narratives, which occurred in Feast for Crows. So that kind of annoyed me. I also felt like a lot of the characters that were shown in Feast for Crows kind of got the short end of the stick in Dance with Dragons. You see Jaime and Arya Stark. Jaime, I think, had 1 chapter, Arya had 2 or 3. And while they got you somewhat excited for The Winds of Winter, in which they better be portrayed and have a bigger impact, I felt that for the most part they weren't really felt as being necessary, and that kind of annoyed me, because they are 2 really good characters. Jaime was established as a good character in Storm of Swords, and Arya has been kind of going on this immense journey ever since she got out of King's Landing. Davos is another person that I felt got really cheated. He has really good chapters up till about halfway, I think, in the novel, and then it just stops. He is, at the end of his chapters, he's sent off to find something somewhere, and I'm not going to say what, and it sounds like he's really scared about it because it's someplace that you don't want to go, and then it just stops. It's like a huge cliffhanger. I thought it was going to keep going in later pages in the novel, and it never comes back, so that kind of annoyed me. They just kind of dropped out Davos right there, and I don't know, it was just dumb. And then Bran did the same thing in this book as well. You see him until about the halfway point, and then he just kind of drops out of the book itself. Either he's not doing anything of significance, or I don't know. It just kind of annoyed me because we didn't see Bran at all in Feast for Crows, and now we see him until about the halfway point of Dance with Dragons, and then it's just gone. So it kind of annoyed me with that too. And one thing that I think needs to happen in Winds of Winter is we need to see Rickon. We need to see what's going on with him, because we haven't seen him since the end of Clash with Kings, and so we don't know if he's dead, alive, or what has happened with him. So we either need to see it through the eyes of his protector, who I don't remember her name, or through his eyes himself. So I really hope that happens fairly shortly. Like I said with Theon's character, I was happy to see him make a return to the story itself, because you see him go from the Prince of Winterfell to like basically a slave. And I'm not going to say like what happens with him, obviously, but it is kind of cool to see how he's transformed. But the characters which have main influence over the story are pretty fun to read about. You see Daenerys trying to keep peace within her small kingdom, and her very last chapter is pretty exciting because it makes you really anticipate what's going to happen in The Winds of Winter. It kind of sets up something that could be quite interesting, and I hope they use. You also see Tyrion and his little adventures across the Narrow Sea, which are quite comical, and you see him interact with other characters that he previously didn't deal with and were in a separate narrative themselves. And then you also see Jon Snow, who is probably one of my favorite characters in this whole series. And Jon is basically trying to do the right thing, but the right thing in this situation is basically looked down upon by everybody in the Night's Watch. And so it's really Jon in a moral struggle. It's like, do I do this because I know it's the right thing to do and because I know these people because I traveled with them, or do I just say screw them, die because it's tradition? It's really cool to see John kind of struggle with that choice. But overall, I did like the book. Let me just specify that. I did like it. I liked it probably more than Feast for Crows. But I did, like I said just now, it does have its faults, and I felt that Martin could have used some of the characters to a little bigger extent than he did. Hopefully with the next installment, The Winds of Winter, fans will get the epicness that was A Storm of Swords. So, one thing that you should know is that I will be doing a series review, so books 1 through 5. The annotation will be right here, or the link to it will be right here, and so go check it out if you want to know what I thought about the series as a whole. And the playlist to all the books is right here, so go check that out if you want, or I'll just have them scattered at the top of the series review. So yeah, like, favorite, comment, and subscribe if you so choose. If you've watched all 5 of these reviews, I thank you, because that means a lot, because I know that they are long, and this one's probably the longest of the batch. So yeah, I think that's about it. As always, my name is Nick Pell, and